Immediately following Britannic's loss, theories abounded as to what had happened. The German government countered that the British ship was illegally carrying munitions in violation of international law. The British countered that a German U-boat, despite it being marked as a hospital ship, had fired in broad daylight, sending doctors and nurses to their doom. Our expedition has a singular goal: to answer the question, why did this ship, with all of its additional safety features, sink 3 times faster than her more famous sister, Titanic? At the height of the events of the First World War, which was gripping almost all of the continents, the British Admiralty chose to use vast transatlantic liners to deliver thousands of soldiers to the front line.
Yes.
One of them was the younger twin of the Titanic, the newly built Britannic, which became a hospital ship that was sent to the Mediterranean Sea. At almost the same time, the Germans sent a number of submarines with experienced commanders and exceptionally trained crews to help their Turkish allies. And after some time, their paths crossed, becoming the next victory for one and a tragic drama for the other. The drama of hundreds of men and women struggling for salvation on the sinking Britannic. With the sinking of the Britannic, there was just over 1,000 people on board, and only 30 people were lost. And those people were lost in a panic when their lifeboats were drawn into the still-moving propellers. Despite the drama, it was a well-carried-out evacuation with a few casualties. As a diver, I've spent 10 years trying to unravel the story of Britannic. Going back with submersibles and ROVs, I can now look at the entire wreck, spending hours and letting her tell me the story as the history literally comes to me.
We're entering the Kier Channel. At this speed, we're set to reach Cape D'Or in 1.5 hours.
In 1976, Jacques Cousteau was the first person to find and explore the wreck. He answered a few questions. He felt comfortable that there was no munitions on board. He also got rid of the theory that the open portholes were the cause of the sinking. But he raised even more questions. What happened that day that didn't let these doors close? To me, that's an enduring mystery. Our goal is to do research all around the bow. So this is the area that we're going to be working. We're coming here with some of the best equipment, literally, since Cousteau. And we're going to do more work in this area to try and figure out why Britannic sank 3 times faster than Titanic. The wreck of the Britannic lies just a few miles from the island of Kier in 400 feet of water. This is way beyond the abilities of the sport diver. It is in the realm of what's called technical diving.
Hope there is no current down there.
15 метров, погружение идет, нормально.
At 900 feet long, Britannic's bow hits the seafloor while the back, or the stern, is out of the water. But the momentum is such that it starts to crumple and bend the front of the ship until finally, under the stress, it snaps into two pieces, and then the back falls to the seafloor. When Britannic sank, her bow plowed into the seafloor. All of that force twisted and bent the bow, cracking the ship at the area of the explosion. The inertia and force of it folded the bow over like a warm blanket. In 30 years of shipwreck exploration, including her sister ship Titanic, it's amazing, absolutely amazing, how intact this ship is. A dive to Britannic is in every way an expedition, and the preparations for such begin years in advance.
Навигатор, прием, проверка связи.
But even then, we have to get everything we need logistically on site, and this is a massive undertaking.
Видим объект.
Of all the places on the wreck, this is the one that reminds me the most of Titanic.
Yeah. I think this was left of Titanic, and everyone knows about Titanic.
Exactly. Everything about this ship is absolutely huge. The anchor chain, the anchor is still in their place. The Olympic-class liners had an unusual arrangement of 3 anchors up on the bow. There's hope that one day, with the permission of the Greek government, these anchors could be recovered and put in a museum. It's a frozen time capsule. 100 years ago, this ship plummeted to the seabed, crushing her bow, and yet still. On the day of the Britannic's sinking, the captain wanted to beach his ship, but unfortunately, it sank before he could get there.
Слушаю.
On the day of Britannic's sinking, nearly every porthole on the ship was open. They had been opened by the nurses in preparation for a new load of wounded soldiers. Many of the soldiers had been suffering from dysentery, and they needed to air out the wards. Can we look a little over there?
Sure.
You know, we know that the nurses opened up the portholes in all of the surgical areas where the patients were, but this area in the bow is where the crews used to quarter, all the sailors, and all of these portholes are closed. It's almost as if we could just rub away the coral and sponges and put a fresh coat of paint on her in some places. And then other places she is a shipwreck. Britannic, Titanic, and Olympic were the largest ships of their time. And when you look at the bow of Britannic, this is evident. Massive capstans, 3 anchors, and a huge chain, all intended to help hold these huge ships in place in case of a storm. Amazingly, the crane and capstans that serve the anchors are all still intact. You know, back in the 70s when Cousteau found the wreck, his divers went into these cargo holds looking for munitions, but they never found any. You know, when you think about it, as a Frenchman, It probably would have meant a lot to him if he could have proved that the British were, in fact, illegally carrying bombs.
Притон, проверка связи.
Какая у вас глубина?
108. Я под мачтой. Пытаюсь найти протокол.
At its most basic, the bell is a signaling device. But to me, it is the heart and soul of the ship. It could simply be used to ring for the watch, or it could toll in an emergency. It helps steer you clear in danger in a fog, or signal that there is an alarm. You know, they say that a ship's bell is her voice, the soul of a ship. It's a shame to think that maybe Britannic has lost her voice. Although many divers have looked for Britannic's bell, it is yet to be found. There is a rumor that it may have been taken by Jacques Cousteau when he first found the wreck.
Течение поменялось, сильно духарит.
Понял, да, что у вас погода? Пока тихо, полный свет, но идет гроза. Через пару часов может накрыть. Иду к Притону. Предлагаю тоже заканчивать. Понял. Знаю, что у тебя.
During his 6-hour decompression, he can drift nearly 6 miles away in an active shipping channel.
Навигатор глубина 60. Подъемы готовы. Подъемы готовы. Можете всплывать.
World War I was ignited with the death of Archduke Ferdinand. Both sides thought it would be over quickly, but because of technology, it went on for 4 years. Neither side would communicate with each other, and it cost 20 million lives. It's hard for people today to understand why civilian ships would be conscripted into the war, but at the time this was normal. When we think prior to the Great War, civilian ships would often be brought in as auxiliary cruisers or fitted with cannon, if you will, so they could defend an island nation like England. England went so far as to make it profitable for their shipbuilders by encouraging them with tax breaks and other considerations to make their ships readily accessible to the Admiralty so that they could be converted into either an auxiliary cruiser, a troop ship, or in the case of the Britannic, a hospital ship.
Sir, the restaurant, the first-class lounge, as well as all the cabins on the upper deck have been turned into hospital rooms.
But this is still not enough. I also need rooms for the seriously wounded, right next to the operating theatre.
Quickly removing all the opulent furnishings inside, she was hastily converted into a floating hospital.
You can use the library on deck C and the second-class restaurant on deck D for that.
Excuse me, gentlemen, I have to check the medical supplies myself.
When the British government conscripted both Olympic and Britannic, it was their patriotic duty for both Harlan and Wolff and the White Star Line to change their ships into both a troop ship and a hospital ship.
I have to find the ship's matron, Elizabeth Annie Dowse.
I'm afraid she's not on board yet, but we'll start by settling your accommodation for now.
Nora Morrison? Nellie? Sophie? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnside. I'm sorry I interrupted you. It's just that I didn't expect to meet my friend here.
Miss Morrison,
Yes?
your cabin is on deck F. I'm sure that Miss Atwood will guide you there and will make sure that you settle in fine.
All right then, let's go.
Every class was represented, literally rushed to serve their country, whether it was the gentry class or the working class. Everyone wanted to do their patriotic duty. And a perfect example of this is when we look at the people on board Britannic. You know, we had wealthy people, we had Boy Scouts, we had civilian volunteers, and we had doctors and nurses that were professionals. Every one of them from every walk of British life came to do their duty. This was the first time in English history that had ever happened.
Oh, great, he didn't incite somebody in my cabin so we could stay together again. I hope they finish loading soon. It's been such a mental day. Nobody seems to understand what's going on anymore. Most nurses are on a different deck, in larger cabins. 4 people each. I've never seen her before.
As a hospital ship, Britannic was expected to have an 1,100-person crew. 300 would be required to operate the ship. The balance would be doctors and nurses to serve the needs of the nearly 3,000 wounded soldiers she would be expected to carry on each mission. When you think about her being turned into this huge floating hospital, the largest ship afloat during World War I and the largest ship sunk. It's incredible. Inside this ship is everything people needed, not only as a hospital, but to keep them happy, entertained, fed. And it's all there, everything. Everything from 1960 is frozen inside, protected. Like her sisters Olympic and Titanic, Britannic was built for the singular purpose of bringing immigrants from the old world to the new, and to allow second and first class clients to travel in luxury. The names of the Olympic-class ships was supposed to convey grandeur and size. Think about it, Olympic, Titanic. And there was a rumor at one time that Britannic was supposed to be called Gigantic. But that was a rumor conveyed by the local newspapers at the time. Even the name Britannic was about grandeur, it was about being big. 10 years ago, I first came to Britannic from Titanic. And when I went to Titanic, it was incredible. But it was very sad. So many people died on Titanic. When I came to Britannic, I fell in love with the younger sister. She's beautiful. She's alive. Every shipwreck tells a story, and Britannic has her story. A story of salvation and mercy. A story of tragedy. I think that, many of those women were patriots, to volunteer as nurses, to help soldiers. On the British side, if we look at the passengers and crew on board Britannic, we not only had official Army and official Navy people running the ship and running the hospital aspect of it, but you had volunteers, nurses that came from literally all walks of life, the richest of the rich, the poorest of the poor. I mean, there were even Boy Scouts on board. This means to me that every aspect of the British population was in support of the war effort. At the time, both sides thought that the war would be over quickly, but each had new technology: airplanes, zeppelins, machine guns, tanks, camouflage, deadly gas. Each of these things not only protracted the war, but made it even more deadly. The Allies begin landing on the Gallipoli Peninsula.
I want you to take your men and attack the left.
The Gallipoli campaign was a battle to secure the Dardanelles and maintain an open sea route to Russia. Britain and France launched a naval attack and followed it with an amphibious landing to try and take Istanbul. Allowing an advanced detachment of troops to come ashore, the Turks opened heavy fire, forcing the Marines to fall back to a narrow strip of beach. When the artillery battery joined in on the annihilation of the Alliance soldiers, the situation then became critical. The joint forces of the Anglo-French fleet carried out landing of the Allies consisting of British, Australian, New Zealand, Indian, and French soldiers. They abandoned the effort and withdrew. The trump card of the Allies are the military ships of the Royal Navy, which would come to the rescue of the landing troops. The Navy ships were able to outgun the Turkish artillery detachments, allowing the rifle units to move inland and hold the beach. Yet, at the very peak of these landing operations, German U-boat U-21, under the command of Captain Lieutenant Otto Hersing, having gotten through the defensive screen, would attack and destroy the battlecruiser Triumph that had been firing shells at the Turkish squadrons.
Zero einfahren, tauchen!
Tauchen! Rennen vorne 20! Torpedoklappen schließen!
Volle Kraft voraus, Tiefe 50 Meter.
Volle Fahrt voraus, Tiefe 50 Meter!
As the battleship started to slowly sink, he dived his U-boat underneath the sinking battleship and then bottomed it for nearly 28 hours until the pursuers had gone. The following day, U-21 breaks through the anti-submarine screen, torpedoes and sinks the British battleship Majestic, which had been bombing the Turkish gun emplacements. With the sinking of the battleship, the British pulled back their naval fleet from the Gallipoli Peninsula, leaving their troops pretty much uncovered. They need to get even more troops there, so they need larger transports, and with the growing casualties, even larger hospital ships. At 47 years old, Captain Bartlett was considered to be one of the most respected and experienced sea captains in the United Kingdom. He had a sense of composure, unparalleled skill, and careful handling of his ship in difficult situations, preferring to make an extra pass rather than risk the ship and its passengers. Originally, this position was planned to be given to another captain with prior experience on the similar ship Olympic. The First Lord of the Admiralty had crossed out his name from the list of contenders due to his involvement in the construction of the Ghost Fleet, the program overseen personally by Winston Churchill. The Britannic was painted in such a way to prevent the Germans from mistaking it for anything other than a hospital ship. But what they didn't know is at that moment, U-73 was being sent to the Eastern Mediterranean to lay a minefield.
Kleine Kraft voraus, Kurs an 130. Fertig machen zum Legen der Minensperre.
Kleine Fahrt, 130, fertig machen zum Minenlegen.
Tiefe 6, Abstand 100.
Tiefe 6, Abstand 100.
Erste Mine ablassen. Heck, erste Mine ablassen.
Heck, erste Mine ablassen.
One of the most successful naval weapons of World War I was the simple, low-tech sea mine.
Erste Mine abgelassen. Erste Mine abgelassen. Erste Mine abgelassen. Kennzeichnung zur nautischen Bestimmung. Zweite Mine ablassen. Heck, zweite Mine ablassen.
Heck, zweite Mine ablassen.
Deployed by German U-boats in the paths of Allied shipping, they would lay in wait at just the right time and the right tide to strike.
17
Kurs
abgelassen.
39, feindlicher Zerstörer an 1000 Meter Entfernung.
U-73's war patrol nearly ended before it started. While they were laying mines off of Malta, they were sighted and almost rammed by a British destroyer.
Wir gehen auf 20 Meter. Kurs beibehalten, Minen legen, weitermachen. 01 ziehen, Gefechtsalarm!
01 ziehen, Gefechtsalarm! Tiefe 20! Ruder auf 5
Had that submarine sank, the fate of Britannic would have been somewhat different. Already some distance from the coast, U-73 ran into the British battleship Russell, which was heading for Malta.
Martin, notieren Sie im Logbuch. Englisches Schlachtschiff in weiter Entfernung auf Kurs Nord.
Captain Zeiss was unable to launch a torpedo attack due to the enemy's speed and distance. But the following day, the Russell ran into the minefield laid by U-73 and sank.
Typische Duncan-Klasse. Zugscheinwerfermasten und zwei nah beieinander stehenden Dampfrohren. 5:45 Uhr. Schlachtschiff nimmt Kurs auf Malta. 0 einfahren. Wir gehen auf 20 Meter. Kurs halten.
In war, your secrets are your strength. And the Germans had a secret weapon. They had the ability to mine in very deep water. So deep that the British didn't think it was possible. The Russell and other vessels had fallen victim to these mines, and yet the British somehow were unaware that the Germans had this technology, and they certainly wasn't going to tell them. Despite being a heavily armored battleship, it only took a single mine to send the HMS Russell to the bottom. Numerous explosions occurred along the ship, resulting in the death of 124 crew and blowing off both propellers and the rudder. Sending our small ROV underneath the upside-down battleship, we're surprised to find that the huge 12-inch guns are still in place, their turret tucked underneath the shipwreck. Just like Britannic, the Russell's in great condition.
Yeah.
The only major difference is this is totally upside down.
Because of the cannons, of the big caliber.
Yeah, just kind of dragged it
They're
over.
heavy.
Of the 720 crewmen aboard the HMS Russell, the 124 men that lost their lives were mostly officers who were asleep in their bunks at the time of the mine explosion. Being in deep water, many of the survivors of the Russell had believed it was a torpedo, not a mine that had sank their ship. If they had thought it was a mine, they would have marked those waters unsafe. These guns are amazing. It looks like we can just clean them up and they'd be ready to fire. Considering that both the Russell and the Britannic were sunk by the same type of mine from the same submarine, I want to be able to compare the damage on both ships. It's one of the Admiral's steam cutters. Apparently they didn't have enough time to launch it.
Знаем, мы видели ее только что.
As a Duncan-class battleship, the HMS Russell used her bristling armament, which included 4 12-inch guns, to blockade the Dardanelles. Adjacent to the hull is a tangle of steel. This is the remains of the navigational bridge. It was here that the captain, during normal operations, would con or drive the ship. Using the sonar on the Triton submersible, we're going to go far away from the Russell and look for objects. Maybe we'll get lucky and find a mine from World War I. Bingo. Holy
Yeah, not
cow.
bad.
Holy cow, look at that.
What do you think, Richie?
Fantastic. This could be one of the mines laid by U-73. Don't get too close. When you break the horn, the acid runs inside and hits a lead plate. That would create an electric charge and detonate it.
The impact should be pretty big to detonate it.
Think about it. 100 years ago, Captain Zeiss laid this minefield and sank the Russell just behind us. Fantastic. Despite the fact that 2 of the rescue ships that were coming to the Russell's aid had hit mines and went to the bottom, U-73's secret wasn't discovered. The English commander in charge of the investigation came to the conclusion that these ships had struck mines that had broken free from their anchors, or possibly been torpedoed by a German submarine that had been seen in the area. British newspapers really didn't carry much of this. They were more concerned with pumping up the victories and raising the patriotic spirit back home, which was endemic in English society.
I clearly remember the last breakfast with my family. The letter I received that morning contained the order of my assignation to the Britannic. It had the effect of a storm outbreak within the walls of my home.
I believe Mother was not too happy about my volunteering at the hospital either. I am certain that one day Mother will admit that she was wrong.
Well, I don't know. It's one thing when you're working here near home, and another when you're being sent to the battlefield.
Not to the battlefield. It is a hospital ship, the largest in the world. Nothing can possibly happen.
Well, you did mention that it was larger than the Titanic. But even that ship sunk when it hit a bit of ice.
Britannic is more advanced and is more durable. There is no ice where we are heading.
The evacuation of wounded from the battlefield of the near-endless Gallipoli campaign became an unsolvable problem for the International Red Cross. The field hospitals set up on the Greek island of Lemnos soon became overwhelmed by the wounded who were arriving every day. The doctors didn't have the time or the means to help all of the arriving patients. The terrible arithmetic soon had the casualties mounting into the tens of thousands.
Files marked in red are for the seriously injured, and they must be loaded first thing. So, if you have any questions, come directly to
During this period of the war, there was a shocking number of casualties. In the course of just one Dardanelles operation, Allied forces lost approximately 150,000 troops. Hundreds of thousands were injured, lost in battle, or taken captive.
I don't want to die. I'm scared. I don't want to die.
Calm down. You will live. The worst part is over. The doctor will do his job and we'll go home on a giant ship.
No, I'm not gonna make it to the giant ship.
For Christ's sake, hold him down. Forceps. Look, give me a hand. Right? Feel that? Hold it. Next.
At the base hospital camp, the conditions were less than ideal. Many of the volunteers were woefully unprepared for what they were about to witness and become part of. Emotionally, it took its toll. Two days later, after loading 3,000 wounded on board, Britannic leaves the port of Madras and heads to the narrow straits, where she's ultimately going to cross paths with the U-73, who at this very moment is at her base getting ready to leave.
Martin, was ist los? Entschuldigen Sie, Herr Caloni. Den kompletten Satz Minen haben wir bereits eingeladen. Jetzt sind die Torpedos dran. Es gab eine Verspätung, weil Hersings Boot zuerst beladen werden musste. Oh, ich sehe, wir haben schon wieder die Kennzeichnung geändert. C150 und C200. Ja, schon wieder. Neben dem C haben Sie jetzt auch noch ein E hinzugefügt. Und weitere Kilogramm Ladung. Sie meinen wohl, dass wenn wir am Telefon nicht mehr C und B sagen, sondern klarer und ernst, Fehler vermieden werden können.
Klarer und ernst. Ich glaube mal in Berlin lassen sich sicher keine Fehler machen, ne? Auf uns.
Vielen Dank, Otto. Vielleicht beim nächsten Mal.
Wie du meinst. Viel Erfolg auf deiner Jagd, Gustav.
Ein alter Bekannter des Schlachtschiffzerstörers. Alles, was vor dem Krieg war, scheint eine Ewigkeit her zu sein.
Herr Kaloi,
Ich habe noch eine wichtige Nachricht vom Hauptquartier für Sie.
Captain Zeiss received orders to lay his next minefield in the Kia Channel, which is exactly where Britannic would be passing through. Our plan for the next dive is to go to the area of the break just forward of the bridge. We wish to explore this area because this is where the drama occurred on the day of the sinking. In order to protect Britannic from accidental attack, she was painted pure white with a huge green band from bow to stern. Large red crosses would appear along the hull. Even at night, they would be illuminated by lights. There would be no mistaking that this was a hospital ship on a mission of mercy. You know, there's nothing good in a tragedy when people die. But it must have been something impressive for those people in the lifeboats the day that Britannic dipped beneath the waves. To see this huge ship, beautiful white, red crosses, green stripe, yellow funnels, blue water, just disappeared. In light of the Titanic disaster, there would be numerous changes both inside and outside of Britannic. Some we could see, some we couldn't. Inside the ship, hidden from view, a double hull and watertight compartments. The Olympic class of ship was a brand new design. It had never been done before. They were the largest moving things in the world and the first of their class ever built. And whenever we build something new for the first time, there's always mistakes, errors, things that need to be corrected. On Olympic, there were things that were found to be at fault, things that Thomas Andrews needed to fix. And he did. He made those corrections. And the new ship, Titanic, bore those changes. She was a little bit different than Olympic. After Titanic sank, a lot more changes were now going to be enacted. And Britannic, the third of the Olympians, was going to benefit from all of those. She had taller watertight bulkheads that came up further. She had a double hull over the engineering spaces to try and protect that area so that what had happened to Titanic wouldn't happen here. But Britannic sank 3 times faster. The navigational bridge where Captain Bartlett and his officers would pilot Britannic was identical to her sister ships, Olympic and Titanic. Designed as an opulent passenger liner, the Fireman's Tunnel was a unique way of getting men from work without ever having to rub shoulders with the paying passengers. This is the area where all of the crew had been quartered. Engineers, boilermen.
This tunnel is all broken down.
Well, this is the area where the explosion happened. Through that hatch cover is the spiral staircase that would bring them all the way down the bottom of the ship into the Fireman's Tunnel. And that's the way many of them would go to work. If you go around the break, you'll see another tunnel where me and my dive team found a way into the boiler rooms. Laying at the very bottom of the ship, it provided the single way of access for the crew to get from the boiler rooms to their accommodations up in the bow. That's our tunnel right there. Everything looks different from the sub.
We can try to get closer if you want.
Going inside Britannic is like leaving the light and warmth of the outside world and entering an alien environment. In 2006, I went down to the Fireman's Tunnel and into the boiler room. And that was through one watertight door. Going over the boilers, I saw the second watertight doors open. Everything looks familiar. Hallways, passages, ladders, but it's oddly taken over, alien, covered in silt and rusticles. It's a dangerous environment. Going in this way, there's only one way in and one way out. We swam around the boilers and then saw that the door leading into number 5 was also wide open. With these two watertight doors open to the sea, it was clear why Britannic sank as quickly as she did. Looking at these watertight doors, there was 3 ways they could be closed. The first way was with an order from the bridge. An electric switch could be turned and the doors would close under their own weight. The second way was a manual lever, where a crew member could flip the switch and the doors again would close under their own weight. The third is what we call a dead man's switch. It's a float, so that if the compartment fills with water, it would come up and then trip the switch and the door would close under its own weight. My theory is that it's quite possible one of the crewmen prevented the door from closing. Imagine yourself in that environment. The ship is sinking, the water's coming through. Are you going to close the door as your friends are trying to get out and save their lives? Or would you leave the door open so they can get out? That day, Captain Bartlett did everything he could to save his ship. But despite that, 55 minutes, it wound up on the seafloor. During the war, there were allegations that Britannic and other hospital ships were illegally carrying soldiers and munitions as contraband to the front, in violation of treaty. The problem with this is not that it couldn't have happened, it could have. But had they been caught, had the British been exposed, well, then they would have violated not only international treaty, but had given the Germans legal cause to sink every hospital ship as being suspect. Having placed his mines in the Kia Channel, Captain Zeiss and the crew of U-73 waited for several hours, hoping for another ship to appear.
Martin, tragen Sie ins Lockenheim. Ein Passagierschiff, ca. 10.000 Tonnen, hat unser Minenfeld in dem Durchgang von Chaos durchquert.
Through the periscope, Captain Zeiss watched as the passenger appeared to pass through the minefield unharmed.
Nach Südkurs gegangen. Mit den Anschein, als ob es auf eine Mine gelaufen ist. Es hat aber keine Detonation gegeben. 6:45 Uhr. Wir bleiben weiter auf Beobachtungsposition. In der Erwartung, eine günstige Gelegenheit für einen Torpedo anwirft.
The strong currents in the Kia Channel keep changing and shifting, and each time they do, they pull the mines a little deeper than intended, so ships could pass right over the top of them and not hit the mines. At the same time, Britannic is traveling at full speed directly into the crosshairs of U-73. On the morning of the explosion, Britannic had yet to pick up her load of wounded soldiers. On previous missions, she had carried upwards of 3,000 wounded soldiers. Had this explosion occurred on the outbound journey, the death toll would have been catastrophic. Many of the ship's crew and night shift nurses got used to seeing Captain Bartlett making his nightly rounds, checking the wards and every room on board Britannic during his sleepless nights.
Auf Kurs 160, Licht eines Transportschiffs. Steuert direkt auf uns zu.
Several hours later, and from a different position, a new target appeared in U-73's periscope.
Kurs 130, Maschinen halbe Kraft voraus, Torpedoangriff.
Fertig machen zum Angriff, halbe Kraft voraus. Kurs 130. Fertig machen zum Angriff, halbe Kraft, 130.
Oder bei 0, tiefer halten.
0, tiefe 10. Halbe Kraft voraus, Torpedos 1 und 4, fertig machen zum Angriff. Volle Kraft, Torpedo 1 und 4.
Unable to count on his minefield, Captain Zeiss began preparations for a torpedo attack. This new target was Britannic.
Report, Mr. Brocklebank.
We've passed the Kia Channel. Course 213 southwest. Speed 16 knots.
Torpedoangriff abbrechen. Schleichfahrt. Wir nehmen den alten Kurs wieder auf.
Schleichfahrt, Kurs 130.
Schleichfahrt.
Martin,
130.
notieren Sie im Logbuch. 23:55. Auf Kurs 130 haben Fühlung zum Lazarettschiff verloren. Mindestens 45.000 Tonnen.
Carry on, Mr. Brocklebank.
Under the command of Captain Bartlett, the Britannic had served 3 successful missions when it was decided that she would be returned to the White Star Line. After being turned into a hospital ship, Britannic served dutifully. She did a couple of cruises, but then the British realized how incredibly expensive it was to operate this nearly 1,000-foot ship. But then things went really bad for them, and they had to bring her back. And that's when she wound up on that final voyage. On her last mission, Britannic left Southampton headed for Italy and arrived in Naples a few days later without incident. But once she got there, there was a huge storm and her exit was delayed. When she finally did depart Naples, she was going ahead at full speed, trying to make up lost time, heading to the Kia Channel. What no one had told Captain Bartlett, though, was a few days earlier, a large French troopship, the Burdigalia, had exploded in the Kia Channel and sank. He's heading to this very area and has no idea what he's getting into. The British Admiralty didn't believe it was possible to place a minefield in the Kia Channel because the water's too deep. And this is exactly where Captain Bartlett and the Britannic are heading. About 1 week before the Britannic disaster, the French troopship Burdigalia was moving through the Kia Channel at night when there was a huge explosion, followed by another, then another. The crew on board believed they were under torpedo attack by German U-boat and manned their guns to fire off into the darkness. The ship broke into 2 and settled to the bottom of the Kia Channel. Look at the telegraph steamer. See how they're all in full reverse? It's probably why the propellers were still turning when she sank.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it looks like that.
To explore inside the Burdigalia, we'll be using an ROV, or remotely operated vehicle. Basically a robot on a rope.
Что здесь? Это
провода, что-то движется по нем.
Moving deeper and deeper inside, we can see the brass beds that were once used by the troops on their way to the front. Near the beds, we can see rifles that were never fired. These are some of the biggest guns on the ship. The day that the ship sank, some of the crew panicked and firing the guns, they thought they saw a U-boat.
Which wasn't there.
On the main deck of the Burdigalia, surrounding each of the cannon, are numerous brass shells. Mute testimony to the battle they had that night with the imaginary U-boats as they fired off into the darkness. As the submersible comes around the back of the ship, we look closely at the stern, and I can see massive damage to the rudder and propellers. It would appear that the propellers were still spinning as the Burdigalia hit the seafloor, breaking off one of the ears of the propellers and bending the rudder at an odd angle. See the propellers broken? When the ship sank, those propellers were still turning, and I bet all this damage occurred when it hit the bottom. The explosion that sank Burdigalia blew the ship into two pieces. Now resting nearly 7 meters apart on the seafloor, we could almost get in there with our submersible. The damage to this section is very reminiscent of what we see on the Russell, where the entire back of the ship was blown off, including her rudders and propellers. Although the Burdigalia was operating as a troop ship at the time of her loss, thankfully there were no soldiers on board the night of the explosion. The only people on board were the crew necessary to man the ship and the gun crews who had fired that night into the distance. As the submersible wakes its way through the debris field, we see numerous items all throughout the sand. Large brass shell casings from the big guns on the main deck, evidence of the battle that night. I think there's a dish right below us. Sitting on...
It's not a dish.
It's not?
It's a pipe.
Oh, it's a stovepipe, yep. A ventilator. Other things were blown out of the ship in the massive explosion that sent her to the bottom. Bed frames, benches, a dinner plate, even rifle ammunition. Moving past the navigational bridge and all of its equipment, we see the main mast, broken and laying over the starboard side. It's always special when you find a bell on a ship. We found 2 of them here on Burdigalia, but we haven't found any on Britannic. Searching the debris field on the other side of the wreck, we find one of the Burdigalia's funnels. Attached to it is a brass steam whistle. In the middle of the ship is a huge area of damage. They're separated now by a distance we can almost get our submersible in between them. The bow section is collapsed and broken inward. In order to investigate the Burdigalia's guns and research the story we've heard about an exploding gun barrel, we decide to send down one of our dive team in hard hat diving equipment.
Попробуй еще умбиликал подтянуть.
It's kind of surreal looking at a man walking on the deck of the Burdigalia after 100 years. Although the submersible allows us hours and hours of time underwater, we dare not get too close to the shipwreck. A hard hat diver, on the other hand, can can literally walk upon our decks and go up to the guns and get the close inspection we need to tell the story of the Burdigalia. Although now covered with corals and marine growth, this cannon was one that had exploded on the night of the battle. Hidden beneath the colorful corals and marine growth is the evidence of panic that night on the Burdigalia. This is the gun where the crew had panicked and forgot to remove the watertight plug at the front of the barrel. Firing the gun, it exploded. Our diver is detailing these moments in a way that we can't while sitting in the submarine. Although the diver appears to be much freer than us in our submersible, he has certain limitations. Tethered to the support vessel by his umbilical, he's limited not only by that hose, but by decompression.
Probably the first steps through the century. Because usually divers like you, they just swim around.
You know, with him in a hard hat, he's a lot safer than we as scuba divers. He's got the whole team supporting him. But when we're diving, we're pretty much on our own. This planned expedition is going to be something unique and special to me and the members of my team. Many of the dive team are not only my friends, some are mentors with over a decade of exploration on Britannic, some of whom I've not seen since the tragedy that occurred in 2009 when one of our team died exploring the ship. Our reunion is bittersweet as we remember our fallen friend, but this opportunity is one we cannot pass.
For me, it's the passion is when it first started, I hadn't read about it. I didn't really know about it. It wasn't until one of the other dive team mentioned that we were thinking about diving the Britannic. And it was such a monstrous task. Looking back now, I can't believe, you know, we did what we did on open circuit. But now, to bring all this technology here and to explore the wreck, well, it's 100 times better, isn't it?
There's so many pictures of things that we do have on Titanic, and Titanic has, I mean, just become an icon for so many people and so many, you know, so many ages. I mean, we all know people that we call them Titaniacs, that are the folks that sit there and count tiles and rivets and
that have their favorite passenger on board.
Exactly. And I mean, Britannic offers an opportunity to sort of get a glimpse into just sort of an untouched Titanic in a way, you know, like once we can get inside.
We all had a scope, a specific scope. So every team had to, you film this, you take stills of that, you deploy the experiment, you are in charge of this. And this, for me, from a technical diving point of view, was something new. This is my 5th campaign on the Britannic, and every time it has changed and we moved onwards. So when my friends tell me what it is diving like on the Britannic, I feel like it's not different from what we dive, but the difference is you have to achieve a goal. You can't miss the dive. You have to get the results at the end.
Precisely 100 years ago, early in the morning of November 21st, 1916, the Britannic was approaching these waters steaming at full speed. In less than an hour, the biggest and most luxurious liner of our time will forever disappear into the blue waters of the Aegean.
We're entering the Keir Channel. At this speed, we're set to reach Cape Door in 1.5 hours.
Well, good. We should be able to start loading today. Henry, please find Major Priestley and ask him to prepare the medical personnel for the intake of wounded as soon as breakfast is over, without any delay.
Yes, sir.
In the minutes leading up to the tragedy of Britannic, the stokers had a change in shift.
Boiler rooms, prepare for change of watch.
Okay, these boys are getting tired. It's time to call it a shift. All right.
Change!
That morning, Chief Officer Hume, while keeping his watch on the bridge, raised the massive watertight doors connecting the boiler rooms, according to Britannic's usual procedure for a quick shift. Hume could never have foreseen that in a few minutes, the raised doors and his direct order to open the portholes to ventilate all of the hospital decks would play a vital role in Britannic's fate. Planned diving operations, as I said, is going to be at the bridge. The submersibles will be filming and lighting the area for you. There'll be no penetration on this dive, but we will be imaging the area of the break and of the fireman's tunnel, because as you guys know, that's what we believe is the cause of the rapid sinking of Britannic. The plan is, again, to be in the water no later than 1 o'clock. It's important because you're going to be having a total runtime of 6 hours in the water, 35 minutes on the wreck, 5.5 hours of decompression.
So we're out before dark.
That's important. You have to be up back. And also the winds pick up in the afternoon and it makes it harder for them to stay on station. The preparation for the dive begins that morning. The diving technology the team is about to use is some of the most advanced on the market. On top of all of the life support equipment, each of us is carrying a camera. Our diving equipment is assembled, checked, and then checked again. The gases we will breathe will be analyzed, then analyzed again by another person. Nothing is left to chance. There's always a risk in deep shipwreck exploration. Anytime we put our heads underwater, we're taking a chance that our equipment may fail. But despite the best of equipment, years of experience, tragedy does strike. Everybody knew Carl. Carl was the first person diver to die exploring Britannic. And each of us were touched by that. Many of us at this table were there when it happened. And so it makes you think about the risks involved in diving and the fact that everyone at this table has a family. We have children, we have people that count on us, and yet we're pushing the envelope way outside of the box in pursuit of something, in pursuit of answers, in pursuit of images, to somehow fix fractured history, if we can, to go back in time.
We didn't all get here by chance. We got here because we were committed to this passion. We got here because we sacrifice our time, the people that we love. They have to handle the fact that we are always away. We don't phone too much. We are not seriously taking responsibility sometimes for what's happening every day at home, which is as hard as, if not harder than diving any wrecks. But again, some people have to do what they can do. And I think that many of you guys sitting in these tables, they know that this is what they like to do. They've been struggling all their life to get up to this level, and they will continue until they will be able to do that. The only hope that I've got is that all of us will just step out of diving when it's time to do so.
This was an epic dive. As we made our way around the shipwreck, many of us were seeing areas we had never seen before. Utilizing this new technology, including the underwater scooters that were propelling the divers, allowed them the opportunity to travel further than they ever had before. "1,100 people all trying to get a seat in the lifeboat. And right here, exactly right here, people started struggling for their life." Moving along the side of the Britannic, one of the most unique features to this ship are these huge gantry davits. After the Titanic disaster, it was mandated that every passenger ship from then on would always have enough lifeboats to make sure that no one ever found themselves without a seat on a sinking ship. As the dive team moves along the side of Britannic, we pull back in the Triton submersible. It is then we can really see how large this massive passenger liner was. After carefully detailing the area of the explosion, noting all of the twisted steel, type of damage we see, that and the historical record lead us to conclude that Britannic absolutely struck a mine and had not been illegally torpedoed, as had been alleged by the British. All too soon, their 45 minutes of exploring Britannic was up, and it was time for them to get back into the diving bell and begin the long ascent to the surface. With Britannic over 900 feet long, the explosion was different depending where you were. In the back of the ship, some of the people didn't even realize the severity of what was going on. Can you imagine what this was like? This huge explosion. The officers on watch have the helm. Captain Bartlett is in his bathroom shaving, getting ready to take a bath.
And look, the plug is still in place.
Yep, he had the water running. He rushes out to the bridge, asks what's going on, and tells them close the watertight doors.
Close the valve! Clear the furnaces! Stop, stop! Close the valve. Boiler room 6. Stiff intake of water through the tubes. Awaiting orders. Awaiting orders! Wait. Oh! I'm getting you!
There's the telegraphs, still in the all-stop position where the engineers put it when they abandoned ship.
So this is the helm.
This is the hydraulic helm. There's two. And there's another one right here that's just laying down right there by the telegraph. The wooden wheels are long gone, but you know, Costello actually took one of the brass rings from the wheel when he found the wreck.
Sound off, Hugh.
Stand by. Sir, 4th and 5th starboard compartments are damaged by the explosion, possibly caused by a mine or torpedo attack. Large intake of water in the 6th.
And shut the bulkhead doors and send in the damage control party.
Yes, sir. Duncan, take one of the watchmen and check all the bow compartments.
Maintain your current heading.
Immediately, the order was given to close all watertight doors. But for some reason, the watertight door between the fireman's tunnel and boiler room 6 refused to close. Captain Bartlett has sent McTavish down to the boiler rooms to evaluate the situation. The crew, including Captain Bartlett, had no idea of the actual amount of damage after the explosion. Some crew members had joked that maybe Britannic had even rammed a German submarine. However, the truth was, Britannic was doomed.
McTavish reporting from boiler room number 6.
Duncan, bridge control, not responding. You Affirmative. I'll do it.
It's very possible that boiler room number 6, that first door, didn't close because the ship was twisted from the explosion. But that doesn't account for the next door going into boiler room 5.
Boiler room number 5 has flooded.
I've thought about this, and I think about the human element, these people that are running from the water, running for their lives. And these doors could close one of 3 ways. They could be electrically closed from the bridge, they could be manually closed with a lever, or there's a dead man switch, a float, that if no one was in the room, a float would come up and trip the lever and the door would come down. Of all 3 systems, none of them worked, which leads me to think that it's quite possible that one of the crew interacted with the door and locked it open, possibly to let his friends get out.
Mr. Hume, sound the general alarm. Tell the radio operators to send the SOS signal with our coordinates. I'm afraid we may need help soon.
Keep your composure. You shall take your life jacket from your cabin and proceed to the boat deck.
Richard, this thing looks like a glass, maybe a window.
It is. It's a brass window. Remember, this was built as an opulent passenger liner. And these windows were meant to slide down so they could look from the bow to the stern when they were navigating from the bridge.
Strange, there's only one that's hanging here.
Well, the whole bridge was originally constructed of wood, and that one window got caught on those cables. Otherwise, it would fall to the seafloor like all the heavy brass things that were part of the bridge.
Life jackets only.
What? Why? All my things are in here. Excuse me, could you please help me open my cabin?
Of course. What's your cabin number?
This one. Thank you for your help.
You're welcome. Life jacket! This way!
Henry,
Yes, sir.
please fetch the logbook at the desk in my cabin.
Yes, sir.
Captain Bartlett was getting fractured information from different sources, and he had to make the best decision with limited information that he had. He wasn't sure how many watertight doors actually had closed, and he had hoped that he had enough time to get into shallow water where he could probably try to effect even greater damage control.
Before we can launch the lifeboats, we must sail as close to Kia Island as possible.
History is full of hindsight, where people look back at the actions of Captain Bartlett that day and say that he should have done this, he could have done that. Well, given the very limited information he had, he went with what he thought would be the best thing. Now, with hindsight, we know that he probably contributed to the ship sinking even more rapidly. But again, he only went with what he knew, and he could see Kia so close, right there, if he could just get his ship there. When we look down there, I think that part of the winch, it's part of the gantry for the lifeboats.
Maybe she got on a lifeboat on another deck.
Many people wonder if there are areas inside that are still as opulent as they were meant to be as a passenger liner. We know she's had a swimming pool, maybe the Turkish baths, gym, the smoking room, the library. All of those things were intended for a passenger liner, not a hospital ship.
All the steam just escaped.
Escaped? What?
It's good. The boilers won't explode. But the generators will stop soon.
It is Sophie! She's down there!
In the final moments of Britannic, it was of paramount importance that the engineers maintained their station and provided electricity to help offload all of the people on board Britannic, not only for the elevators inside, but for the electric davits and lifeboat launching outside.
Sophie! We're here! I will help you!
Stay back!
We are here now! You're going to be fine!
Paul! The grill's stuck!
Please help me!
I need to find some leverage.
I'm so scared!
I'll be right back!
I'm begging you, please! Don't leave me here alone!
Stay back!
I'm here! I'm here! I'm so scared! I'm stuck! Stay put!
Move!
Without electricity, the ship couldn't operate. And even when Captain Bartlett was blowing the horn and then blown out of the bridge, you think the captain would be the last person out, but that's not the truth. The reality was the engineering crew was inside running the generator. And when they heard that whistle, that was their moment. That was when they were told to abandon their post. And they climbed out through the escape trunk through funnel 4. Britannic holds her secrets. Some of them are very far inside. But not all of them. Some of them are outside. Not everyone knows that the fourth funnel on the Olympic-class liners was a fake. It was just put there to make people think the ship went faster.
By the way, one of the funnels is just right below us.
Can we go look at it?
Why not?
The 4 massive funnels on board Britannic were held in place mostly by their weight and a few cables. As Britannic sank, they snapped off under their own weight and fell to the seafloor around the wreck. Today, the massive funnels, flattened by time, lay a short distance away from the resting Britannic.
Strange that there's nothing else on the seabed, just funnels.
I've been diving this for 10 years, and I've never come out this far. I've never seen this. When we look at Britannic, we look at other shipwrecks like her, like Titanic, Lusitania, the Andrea Doria. Each of these ships are a moment in history. They are a frozen moment in time that tell us about a human condition. Britannic tells us about the mercy of war. It tells us about the tragedy of war. And it tells us about the wastefulness of war, when such a beautiful ship was lost for all time.
The doomed Britannic, as if afraid to be alone with its unavoidable and imminent demise, did not allow its last crew members to leave the ship.
Come on! That's the exit!
Keep moving!
One of the most defining features of the Olympic-class liner are the huge bronze propellers, and Britannics were the largest of all three of them. Designed to push the Olympians through the water at upwards of 23 knots. On the day of the explosion, they did nothing to help save Britannic. Can you imagine what it was like for those people in the lifeboats? When this huge propeller is spinning out of the water? And they can't get out of its way. Just cannot get out of the way of the propeller. Shortly after the explosion, most of the crew made their way to the upper decks. Some of them started to panic, and they commandeered 2 lifeboats, launching them without permission. What they didn't know was that the engines were still going, and one of the propellers was out of the water. The 2 lifeboats were drawn into the still-moving propeller and smashed to bits. 30 people, the only people who died in Britannic sinking, were on those lifeboats. After Captain Bartlett gave the order to abandon ship, things moved further rapidly. Britannic listed over so quickly, and many of the survivors simply jumped into the Aegean Sea. Fortunately for them, the water was warm, and this helped avoid the loss of many lives.
This was the last day I was ever to see our Britannic.
"55 minutes after the explosion, Britannic would leave the surface, never to be seen again. look at this ship and I want to come back. I'm not finished. I don't have all the answers. I know I haven't answered everything. I'm not done. With you the last couple of weeks, I've spent more time exploring this shipwreck than I've done in 10 years.
Navigator telling us going back to the ship.
Because of the Titanic disaster, design changes were made to Britannic. Those safety features, along with the warm water, allowed for nearly everyone to survive the tragedy. Some of the survivors were brought to the British naval base on the tiny island of Malta, which housed one of the region's largest military hospitals at that time. By strange coincidence, Malta was the very place U-73, which had sunk Britannic, had begun its war patrol.
Are you okay?
Immediately after the sinking of Britannic, the British press wasted no time in blasting the German government for torpedoing a hospital ship. Whether or not that was true, they weren't about to let the truth get in the way of a good story or propaganda for their purposes.
Oh, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Our photographer came, so now we're all gathering round for a photograph. Oh. All these ships. Which one you reckon could take us back home?
You know, I decided to stay here.
To stay? That's silly. After all we have been through.
What have we been through? It is war, and I will be of more use here than back home.
Sophie? Ellie? We're about to take a picture. Come on, let's go. Or we'll miss it. Nobody will be waiting for us. I'll be staying with you.
The fate of the survivors will go different ways. Some doctors and nurses stayed on in Malta and would work there until the war's end. Others, having left for the front lines, would be forever lost in the near-endless fields of battle. Fortunately, many would serve their duty until the end of the war and thankfully survive. Slowly over time, their names and stories are forgotten, lost in time, just as the once majestic liner Britannic had for many years been forgotten at the bottom of the Aegean. Exploring deep shipwrecks such as the Britannic is a dangerous undertaking, pushing the limits of both man and equipment. It's not easy to explain to my family and friends why I do this, put my very life at risk to answer these questions, to see the truth with my own eyes. It's more than a passion. It's a calling that reaches deep inside my soul, drawing me, pulling me, and defining who I am. Tragically, some of us have paid the ultimate price to know the truth.